I'm Caitlin Coombes with energeticcity.ca, and welcome to Council Corner, powered by the City of Fort St. John. Today we're talking to Councillor Tony Zabinsky about items discussed at the Fort St. John Council meeting on October 28th. Councillor, how are you doing today?
Great. Yourself, Caitlin?
I'm doing very well.
Fantastic.
All right, so to start off, during the Committee of the Whole, you had some presentations about the official community plan.
Right.
Can you tell me a little bit about what that is and kind of what it entails?
Well, our community plan is really our highest delegation, or not delegation, but procedural that we have for the community. It goes into a lot of diverse areas that we go into, okay? So it's developed by having interactions with municipal amenities, transportation, health, housing, economic development. And those are developed and got together so that we can sit down and produce something for our community. And so the last one we did was in 2017. And a lot has changed since 2017. We've had the 100th Street corridor open up, the RCMP station open up.
Yep.
Festival Plaza has come to fruition. We've also had different development in our parks and recs. So now it's time to sit down and bring it up to a new standard with what has changed. And it should be noted that it has to be done every 5 years because the government, provincial government, has come out with a new regulation that it has to be done every 5 years. And that was mainly driven because of the housing needs review in our province. So that's where we are right now, and staff is going to be looking at it, and we look forward to them bringing it to us.
Wonderful. And what's the timeline look on the plan? Where are you now, and kind of what does the next couple of weeks, months, and years look like for that plan?
Okay, great question. So they've already started on this.
Wonderful.
Okay, they started actually at the Moose FM block party. They sat down and talked to people. What's important to them? And so they've gathered that information, and then I do believe if we looked at the timeline that they presented to us, in November they're going to be doing some surveys, and then they're also in the new year going to be doing some more surveys and getting that information. And they hope to have this to council by the 2025 Moose FM block party, and to have this finalized, if memory serves me correctly, by December of 2025, where we will pass it.
Oh, wonderful.
So within a 14 months type action.
Yeah, something to look forward to down the line.
Definitely.
Wonderful. And you also had a couple bylaws come through.
We did.
Specifically a sewer use regulation, charges, and water regulation. It's come up a couple times in a few other meetings in the past. What can you tell me about this bylaw?
Okay, so water and sewer. So for the people out there, water and sewer is its own entity. So your taxes do not go to water and sewer. They just handle the operations of the city. So what we've done, and most people that are in the city, they get a water and sewer bill. And that money that you pay for the water and sewer is its own entity, i.e. operations and capitals for the water and sewer. So this amendment that came out is actually, what we're amending is the actual rates that we're going to be charging the water and sewer.
Okay.
Because they look after their own infrastructure, the operations of it, as well as the capital projects of it. Now, when we look at the increase, it's not just what we're doing for operations, but also future capital expenditures that we're going to be looking at. You know, such things as water reservoirs, maintenance to them, or maybe a new one being built, or mainline looping of our water mains, right? So that's why that came up in the report. You saw, probably you'd read in the report that we're not doing an extensive increase from 24 to 25. We did listen to you guys, and we're still keeping that in the sewer from May 1st to August 31st, that we're dropping our sewer rates by 21 cents a cube.
All right.
And that is because we realize that during the summer, we're not catching all that sewer water that people are using to do their waters, their gardens, their lawns and stuff like that. So we did listen to that. So that's why you have a lower rate from May 1st until September 1st, and then it goes back up to the current rate.
That's a good way to do it because, of course, I mean, I live in Taylor. Everyone has a lawn. They're always out there watering.
And we get it here in town too, right? But again, the amendment that was presented is because of when staff brings back, it's an own entity, water and sewer, and they look at what capital projects are coming up as well as operational costs that are going to be moving forward. And this will be coming up to us every year because they review all this and we deal with it every year.
I believe last week I was talking to one of your fellow councillors about how some of the bylaws, you try and bring them in to last as long as possible. With these ones, it's a little more difficult, so I would assume they come up on an annual basis.
Something like this, it has to be an annual basis. You know, it's hard to project with the cost of buying
anything
today, you know, what it's going to be 2, 3, 5 years down the road. So in regards to water and sewer, that's why you're going to see it come up every year and why there might be a change or not a change. But again, that's because staff looks at this, they present it, they tell us here's what for that sector, and again, this is just water and sewer that we're talking about, and that's why that has its own bylaw amendment to it.
Okay. And you also went through a couple of grant applications during the meeting.
Right.
And one of them was a Community Emergency Preparedness Fund Disaster Risk Reduction.
Now that's a mouthful.
Yes, I was looking at that going, that was interesting. Part of the process, it kind of split into 3 categories from what I was reading.
That is correct.
And category 2 seemed to be a lot of surveys and kind of assessments of historical data. Would these be new surveys for this, or would you also be drawing on data from previous years?
Okay, so let's clarify that.
Yeah.
So the amount is $4.2 million.
Yes.
Not a small amount of money, but we're lucky that hopefully we get it. So that's broken down into 3 different parts. The first part is roughly about $140,000. And that category 1 is to sit down and look at the water runoff from the Alaska Highway coming toward our sewer system, okay, which is down before the Beaufort Creek.
Yep.
And we're going to look at that because there is a water runoff that comes that way. Then there's another $100,000 that is going to be for actual water runoff in regards to where we are situated, we tend to have those heavy rainfalls that come our way. And water erosion is becoming very serious, no different than fire prevention. So we have to look at how we're going to reduce this runoff. And again, that runoff is just not going down to Beaufort Creek, but it's going down to Fish Creek. You know, if you had a chance to sit down and go by Kin Park, we have a big settling pond that we did to reduce the water going into down into Fish Creek that we put in. So there's $100,000 that's going to be done for that review. Now we already have some data on that, and this is just to bring that data current and more relevant on where we are right now. And then, for lack of better words, if you do the math, there's about $4 million left over, and that is really the crunch of all this is. And that is because a lot of people don't know, but we have our runoff through Beaufort Creek that goes down toward the old fort. And we also have a micro project that's down there. And those are serious infrastructures that we have, over time, have put money into. And with water erosion happening, we want to make sure that we're not upsetting a community or an area down there. So this is to look at and shore up what's happening down at the base of the Beaufort Creek, and as well as to make sure that our micro hydro project, which is at the base of the old fort, is also not going to be impacted, because with the torrential rains and the water runoff that we have that comes down there, that's some serious infrastructure that we could potentially lose, as well as our water services, you know, and the sewer that we have there for water. So, you know, we have to, it's to sit down and mitigate risk.
Yeah.
And it's great that the money's out there, and we have 2 years to actually act on this. So it's not that we get it, we sit on it, but there is a 2-year mandate to sit down and get on top of this.
Definitely, and especially if you have this infrastructure, it's all well and good to protect it, but if you don't do the research to figure out what you're protecting it from, it's very difficult not to waste money. So you have to do the research and then protect it properly.
That is correct, and it's our tax dollars. Like, we've spent money on this thing. We got to protect it. If we don't protect it, we're going to have to replace it, and that's going to be more than $4 million. I can guarantee you that. When you look at that, what it takes to sit down and put there's two, again, bringing up, there's two things, 2 of the 4 that are most important that makes a community and people want to have. They want to make sure when they flush their toilets that it goes away.
Yep.
And when they run the water comes out. And our sanitary system has to be looked after. And it's right at the crutch of the Bofu Creek when it goes there. So we want to make sure it's protected and what it's going to take to protect that, as well as all the infrastructure down the road.
Yeah. Preventative maintenance rather than...
Well, yes. Inexpensive, but let's look after it.
Definitely. And one of the topics that was kind of a hot topic during the council was the annual remuneration report. Can you tell me a little bit about what that amendment bill document was about?
Sure. So it wasn't a hot topic. I'll be honest with you. I'll be candid with you. The reason that we wanted to discuss it is that we wanted to have transparency. A lot of people don't understand how council is paid, what we're paid, and how does that go about. So first of all, we wanted to make sure that this is transparent, that everyone understands the lay of the land on remuneration for mayor and council. So this came forward, and what it was is we recommended to staff back in the day that they go to a third-party consult to sit down and look at what is out there for other municipalities and what could we use for our municipality. And it was recommended that the current sitting council should look at remuneration for the next term council.
Okay.
So what this was about was us discussing what wages for a councillor and a mayor should be paid for the next sitting councillor for 2026. Because the next election coming to us is going to be in the fall of 2026.
So this is for 2027 to 2030 or 2026?
It'll be 2026 to 2030.
Okay, gotcha.
For a 4-year term. As it presently stands, that you sit as a councillor for 4 years. So when that came forward, we wanted to make sure that, first of all, that everyone understood that this is not for this sitting council. This is not a wage for us, but this is for the next councillors that want to put their name forward. And the reason we want to do that is there are people that want to put their name forward, but they're uncertain number. I mean, most people, and I would say 99.9% of the people that run for council do it because they care about our community. They value our community. They want to have input to our community. They want to make sure that our community prospers. But at the same time, they might have a full-time job, and if they have to leave their job to come to council, they might not get paid for that. So what does that look like? Is there any compensation for that? Well, we're telling them right up front that, listen, here's what you're going to get paid based on those parameters that we set out, that we agreed to. And the parameters are, and it's all there, we are going to pay councillors 40% of what the mayor makes. Yep. And I do believe the mayor right now makes $98,000 a year. And we are going to give them an increase to their wage based on CPI, the current pricing index, of plus 1%. Okay. To a maximum of 3%. Now, people might read into that you're going to give them CPI plus 3%. No. What we're going to do is we're going to give you total max 3%, i.e., an example, if the CPI is 1%, we're going to give you CPI plus 1%. So that year you would get an increase to your salary of 2%. But if CPI, or the Consumer Pricing Index, is at 8%, and we add 1%, because we agreed to CPI plus 1% to a maximum of 3. So CPI is at 8, we give you 1, that would be 9. No, you're capped at 3%. You wouldn't get more than a 3% increase. I'm sorry that you're backwards 5%. And this was recommended so that at least we make sure that we're not doing when the council gets together, when this is done in the middle of the term, and now that could be changed next term when they want, but this is done in the middle of term so that they can analyze, are we keeping up with inflation, and is it enough to entice people to run for council so that we have a diverse group of councillors to represent our great city.
And definitely you don't want to be a councillor for the monetary gains, but if, like you said, if you've got a full-time job, this is a lot of hours. Even as a civic reporter, keeping up with you guys is really hard. So I know you guys put a lot of effort into things and a lot of time. So while it's not something you don't get into being a councillor to get money, but it helps a lot.
Well, it does. But I mean, in this day and age, you have to be paid for the time you put in there. Now, and I understand the nonprofits and you put in charitable time and we do that as well as councillors. We go to different meetings and everything else like that. But you are expected to show up here twice a month, as well as your portfolios that every councillor has to go out there and do it. And you need to be compensated for that. And what does that look like? So right now, we are compensated at 37.5% of what the mayor makes, and based on CPI plus 1%. So we never changed the CPI, the increase, the remuneration every year. The only thing that was recommended based on where we are is that the actual starting point, usually in regards to that, goes from 37.5% of what the mayor makes to 40%.
Okay.
And if you read the report and everything else, the mayor's salary presently is not changing. So that is sort of the formula in regards to that.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for clarifying that.
You're welcome.
All right. And those are all the questions I had. So thank you very much for joining me today.
Well, thank you very much for your time. It was great. And I encourage everyone to tune in to our council meetings and because they're informative and there's a lot of dialogue. And again, we try to keep, as indicated, transparency for everything that we do.
Absolutely. And that was Council Corner, powered by the City of Fort St. John. I'm Caitlin Coombes with energeticcity.ca. We'll see you next time.